Guys, your next speaker I've known for almost a decade, and he covers everything from diversity and inclusion to just being an overall motivational speaker. And he works on everything from an international to a local level when it comes to helping peel back the labels of disability. We touch on everything from why it may not be a good thing to hold the door open for somebody to what it looks like to disclose a disability and how people go about that in very different ways. And the great thing is we give real life scenarios. So I am excited to bring you this conversation with my friend LaMondre Pough. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another interview for Disability My Experience, where we are peeling back the label of disability and we are starting to normalize an awkward conversation. Because let's be honest, disability from either side of the conversation can be an awkward one. And I think the more we put it out there, the more we talk about it, the more normal it becomes. We are joined by my friend LaMondre Pough. And LaMondre, if anybody's been following me and No Label team for any amount of time, they've seen you several times. And I want to thank you for joining me today. And I just want to dive right in. And when you hear the question, what does it look like to peel back the label of disability from your perspective? What does that look like for you?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me again, Nathan. It's always a pleasure and a joy to be with you, my brother. So thank you. But when I think of peeling back the label or layers of disability, what really stands out to me is peeling back the complexity of us all as humans. You know, you hear people say, well, we all have disabilities, and that is true. But if you're really talking about peeling back the layers of it, it is to peel back the layers of humanity. It is to peel back the layers of what makes us all unique. And it is to peel back the layers of our victories, of our challenges, of our insecurities, of our confidence. It's to peel back all of those layers, because here's the thing, and I know you've heard me say this, and I know you've heard others say this countless times. Disability is the only minority group that anybody can join at any time. And in fact, most of us will at some point in our lives, whether it be through accident, illness, or simply through the process of aging, you will experience some form of disability. So having said that, that means that it is universal. And because it's universal, to peel back the layers of that is to peel back the complexities of what it means to be human.
So peeling back the layers of what it means to be human. I'm curious when you think about that, because the goal here is to start having conversations with people who don't talk about disability on a regular basis. And it's not necessarily because they don't want to, it's because they might not know how to or have the skills to articulate what they're feeling. And as we've learned throughout all the stuff going on, now it's like, well, if I say anything, is it going to be the wrong thing? So I'm going to shut up and say nothing,
right,
rather than put myself out there and get in trouble. But how can somebody who is feeling like, I want to be more involved, but I don't know how to start the conversation from my own perspective, what do you think they can do to start that conversation?
Well, let me preface this by saying, to say nothing is absolutely the wrong thing to do. I believe that if we can start with dialogue, if we can start having the conversation, then that's how we get to understanding. So I think that being open and being willing to say, I don't understand, or being willing to say, hey, tell me about this. Now, being willing to ask those questions and to say those kinds of things, that's one side of it. But the other side of it is for those who are very familiar with disabilities and for those who are the ones who will be giving the information. I think it's important that we create a safe space for people to ask the questions. I think it's important that we create an environment where we want to share, because I believe that people are basically good and they want to understand. They're asking questions because they want to engage. So if we in their process, if we hinder their process of understanding by being hypercritical or hypersensitive when someone is simply seeking to understand, then we negate our entire purpose of wanting to be understood. So I think the two things that have to happen is that the questions have to be asked, the conversation has to be started, and there has to be a safe place for people to fall on their face. And I think if we do those two things, that is the beginning of it.
So I love that, because one of my questions I thought of before this kind of falls within that same line of, I was thinking about it from all of the people that are advocating for their rights, and because it's the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act.
Yeah.
I was thinking, how do we have the conversation? And I think you answered it a little bit, but how do we have the conversation without allowing that it may be anger, but the pent up emotions that often come up when people are advocating for rights? How do we do that in a productive way so we don't come across as what I like to call the angry disabled person and have a productive conversation?
Right. I think it's important to be authentic. I think it's important to be authentic in how you feel. I think it's important to be authentic in what your experience is. And so sometimes I am angry, and I think it's important to honor that. I think it's important to honor who and what I am. But what I'm not in favor for is canceling. I'm not in favor for, okay, because someone has made a mistake or because someone has misspoken, if that person's intent is good and they're teachable and they're willing to learn, then we can work through it. But now that does not mean that you won't get angry sometimes. That doesn't mean that you won't get people who are offended at times. But honestly, that's in every walk of life. That's just not something that's exclusive to the disability conversation. And so I think it's important that we are authentic and that we honor the feelings and the emotions that we have. But in that, remember what the ultimate goal is. Remember that the goal is to foster understanding. Remember the goal is to foster progression. Remember that we are really looking at how do I get people to understand my needs and the needs of others, and how do I understand what their needs are? How do I understand, what's complicated for them in really navigating this world with disability? And as you and I both know, it can be very complicated and very nuanced in doing so. But again, I think that being open to that is what's important, and that's how we really begin to peel back that part of the onion.
And I think there's lots, like you just were talking about, there's lots of barriers that are faced by people that aren't necessarily well known by people who don't deal with it on a regular basis. So I'm curious, from your perspective, from your own life experience, what is one of the biggest barriers you feel like you've personally faced that people may not even realize is a barrier?
That's a good question. I think one of the biggest barriers, and I think it's a common big barrier, are attitudes. Attitudes as it relates to people with disabilities. And I think that those attitudes transcend so many areas of life, whether it be employment, whether it be housing, whether it be whatever. I believe the biggest obstacle that people with disabilities face is basically the will to change those barriers. And what I mean by that is, we often talk about we have to talk about employment being an issue for people with disabilities. Well, it's only an issue because there hasn't been the will to really change that on a big scale. Um, Even when we talk about architectural barriers, I mean, something as simple as accessibility to a building or a sidewalk or a website or digital inclusion. Yeah, it's a barrier, but it's only a barrier because people have not had the will to change it. For example, there is no need to always have steps. Why were buildings designed with steps? Why? Because it could have just as easily been designed with a ramp. It could have just as easily been designed with uh, alternate tags and descriptions being built into the website, because we simply don't have the will to do it. And so I really believe that the biggest barrier has been the attitudes. And honestly, it's not even necessarily the attitudes of the people who are not familiar with disabilities. Some of the barriers are from people who are absolutely, who would claim to be on the right side. People who, yes, I'm for it, I'm progressive, I'm all of those things. And sometimes those are the hardest nuts to crack, because there's a sense of, I already know. There's a sense of, this is how we've been doing it, and this is how it's going to be done. And because I'm on the right side, I don't have to hear you when you say, I need you to see me. Because I already know how y'all are. You know?
Oh man, there's a lot right there, man.
Yeah.
There's a lot.
And let me say this also. You know, having said that, I want to go back and kind of reiterate something as well. You know, you mentioned, you know, how do we move through this without being seen as the angry disabled person? You know, I'll be honest with you. I don't know if it's because I'm older now, but I am not really interested, or I am not as willing to dumb down who I am to make somebody else comfortable anymore. I'm not. And I don't want that to come off as I'm angry, because I'm not. But what I am is, I want people to understand this is authentically what it is. And, you know, so often we've done the smile and grin and bear it kind of thing. And what ends up happening a lot of times is that we end up perpetuating existing problems by doing that. Now, the flip side of that is true. The flip side of that is also true. Sometimes we've gotten so angry and so enraged that even when people are trying to get it right, we injure them, we hurt them. So it makes it difficult. So the truth is, be authentic, but also be open. Be authentic, but be willing to guide and support and nurture people through their learning process. So I wanted to make certain that we were clear with that, because as you know, as you and I both believe, no label truly defines me. No label truly defines me. And so even in the label of anger, that doesn't define who I am. Is there may be a moment in time, but that is not the sum total of my existence.
Yeah, I think it's just when you get hit with that so many times, it becomes the overwhelming view of everything. But I agree 100% that it's a moment in time. And I think that when we talk about, and this is anything that's worth fighting for, right now our lens is just disability, but I think that there's ways to leverage, like there are going to be people that fight for their rights in different ways, and we need everybody to be a part of it to win. And we need to be able to leverage everybody's skills, whether you are a protester or whether you're somebody who's coming behind the protester and communicating in a way of like, did we see what happened here? What can we do to start to create the change? Because I think that's
Right.
both necessary.
Right. Absolutely it is. Absolutely it is. Yeah, you're right. You know, you really have to have, it takes all of us. It does take every single one of us. And sometimes the protest is the shout that gets the attention. And then behind that shout that gets the attention, then there is the agenda that's been laid out. And then behind that agenda is the plan to make that agenda come to fruition. And then behind that plan to make that agenda come to fruition are the people who work to make it happen. And then there are those who then keep the accountability in place to make certain that that justice is seen in the public squares. So all of those things are important. It's the aggregate of all of that that makes the difference.
Yeah.
I hope that wasn't too deep.
Nah, hey, that's what we like here. We like to make people think, because that's what is going to create the most change, I believe. That's so interesting. And I know there are people that have many different perspectives of this thing. It's not just people that don't have much experience with disabilities. It's people who work directly with people with disabilities. It's people with disabilities themselves. So I'm curious, based on the conversation we've had up until this point, what piece of wisdom or advice would you offer to somebody who's in their early 20s and living with the disabilities these days?
The first piece of advice or wisdom that I could give, or just my words basically, would be, first of all, you are enough, and you're perfect exactly as you are. You're a person who will learn, who will grow, who will evolve, who will change. And you will look back, when you're my age, you will look back on that time and say, wow, look where we came from. Look what we did. I would also say, be fearless. Go after it. If you can conceive it, and it's something that you're passionate about, go after it. Go after the things that makes your heart sing. Go after the things that you're good at. Go after the things that requires something of you. Do something that's hard. You know, I'm really fortunate in that I have had, you know, some amazing experiences in my life, and I'm still having amazing experiences even now. And even when I messed up, even when I fell flat on my face, the thing that I realized is that I have still been better for that situation. So the other piece of that is, don't be afraid to fail. And when people say failure is not an option, it's a lie. It is an option. It really is an option. And honestly, it is one of the best things that can happen to your success. It is one of the best things that can happen to you for success, is to try something, mess it up, and be like, oh, okay, that's what I did wrong, or that's where I went wrong, or that's what happened with that. So be willing to fail. And the other piece is, be kind. Be kind to others and be kind to yourself. Give yourself some leeway. Give others some leeway. Kindness goes a long way. Kindness will open doors that your education never could. Kindness will provide opportunities that who you know may not be able to afford you. So those are three basic things that I would say to a young person that has a disability. Well, and there's one more thing. The world is yours. The world is yours. So you are not defined by disability at all. It may be a defining point, but it's certainly not the defining point. And I would say, embrace all of who you are. Embrace all of who you are and shine.
Man, so you guys watching, listening, guess what? Doesn't matter that I asked that about a young person with a disability. That advice applies to all of us, I believe. Doesn't matter if you have a disability or not. All that applies to you, because as we touched on earlier, when we peel it all back, at the end of the day, we're all human. So we can take that and we can run with it. And when you were talking about failure, it was like that in and of itself is a label, and we just give it a bad definition, or that it means something bad, and really it just means that you're learning at the end of the day. And I want to talk about, if that's the advice that you just did give to a young person with a disability, what can you and I do to continue to create opportunities for those young people to see possibilities? What? So, LaMondre, man, as I've been thinking about our conversation and the overall tone of the conference, the summit, whatever we want to call it, I thought about some great questions that just full transparency, people. We had some technical difficulties. So if you're looking and you're like, hey, wait, they both changed clothes, they look different. That's the way that it goes. So we're coming back fresh to finish this up for you guys. But as I thought about coming back on and finishing, I had some questions that audience members asked. So I wanted to get your thoughts on one of the questions that they asked was, how do you deal with people who stare? Because I'm sure you've dealt with that at some point in your life. And not only, their question wasn't only how do you deal with it, but how can they, as a family member and a friend, it sounded like it was something that they were dealing with and figuring out how to respond for themselves. So what kind of insight can you give that person?
Well, here's the thing that I realized: people are going to look. People are going to stare. And actually, when I was a kid, my mom told me that people were going to stare at me anyway, so I might as well give them something good to look at. Is what my mom told me. And I have seen where people have gotten really angry and have said nasty things to people because a person is looking at them. The way that I look at it, it is really quite simple. People are curious. That's why they stare. That's why they look. And I really don't have a problem with it. I think that the thing is to understand that people are staring or looking because they see something. It's because it's something that that's not typical for them. So I know that if I see something that may be something that I'm not used to saying, I'm going to look at it, and it's because I'm curious. It's because I'm wanting to know more about that situation. So I think that we have to look at it as that. Now, if somebody's being disrespectful, if someone is is being obtrusive, then that's a whole different ball of wax. But if you're talking about people just looking because they look, I just kind of realized that that's the way it is. When we see something that may not be typical to us or usual to us, we have a tendency to look at it. And I think one of the ways that I internalize it is that, okay, this person is trying to process this situation. Now, if they need some help, they can ask some questions. But if not, I'm going to allow them to have that time for themselves. Because honestly, it doesn't affect me and it doesn't bother me in any way in terms of actually disrupting my day. I just realized that that people are looking, that people are watching, and I'm still going to present myself as big and as full and as authentic as I possibly can. So I would just say, just recognize that people are curious, and and you roll. And if you see something that's interesting, you look at it too.
Yeah, I think that was the best point there, that it doesn't matter who we are. We all do that. And guess what? Just because we're talking about disabilities, I know people with disabilities do it to other people with disabilities, because we're like, oh, I wonder what their life is like. And that's a real legitimate question.
Right, right. And that's just people. That is just people. You look at people and you try to figure out, where are they going? What has their journey been like? I mean, I know when I was a kid, and sometimes even as an adult, I'll see a random car or I'll see a plane, and my thinking is, where it's going to where it's going. You know, it's just who we are. It's just who we are. So.
Yeah. So, and I love the fact that, hey, we're here if you want to ask questions. If not, I'm going to go about my day. Um, I think one of the most interesting thing is, if somebody asks a question, then what is your response going to be like? How are you going to approach that person? And I've always looked at it as an opportunity to uncover some of that um, curiosity and that misunderstanding that they have, because they've never seen it before. So
Right,
we
right.
have.
And I didn't mean to cut you off, but I think that's an important that is an important distinction as well, because if they ask questions, then it's up to you to decide, you know, am I willing to go through this exercise? Am I willing to answer the questions, or do I want to just say no? I don't want to answer that and move on. And that's totally up to you. That's totally up to you as an individual. I choose to respond typically. I choose to be open about it, because a part of my goal is to foster understanding. And I know that understanding only comes through dialogue, it's through communicating, it's through interacting. That's how we truly understand. So I look at it as an opportunity to exchange information, not only me sharing information about myself, but me also learning about that person's experience and that person's perception as well. I remember when I was a child, um, my mother had a friend who had gotten injured in Vietnam, and at the time I could walk, but I had a really funny walk. Everybody looked at me and was like, "Wow!" In fact, they used to call me Fred Sanford. I don't know if you guys remember Sanford and Son, how Fred would walk, and people used to call me Fred Sanford when I walked. And I remember walking up to the gate, and my mother's friend was standing there, and his injury was such that it affected his face. It affected his facial features. And when I walked up to the gate, he said, "Hey man, what's wrong with your legs?" And I said, "I have muscular dystrophy. What's wrong with your face?" And at first, my mother was mortified. She was like, "Oh no, how could you say that? You don't ask him that." And he was like, "No, it's okay. It's cool," because I asked him what was wrong with his legs, and that was his response. Now, understand, I was probably about 4. I was probably about 4 years old. But what it did for me, looking back on it as an adult, I realized that, and when he told me what happened, let me finish telling the story. When he told me what happened, it was like, okay, I get it. I understand. Even as a child, I understood, and we were cool. We became the best of friends after that. But it was a point of understanding that, hey, I see something that's different about you, and you see something that's different about me, and we had that exchange. We had that dialogue. I welcome, especially when kids ask questions. I welcome when kids are amazing, because many times they're upfront and unfiltered. They just want to know what's going on. And when you tell them and explain it in a way that they can understand, usually kids are like, cool, let's play, you know? Um, and that was one of that example of that exchange between me and that gentleman really opened the doors in terms of how I view that exchange, you know?
It's so funny that that's one of the most common things that we end up starting a conversation with, or we hear a lot, is the statement of "what's wrong with you." Uh,
Right.
but it's just a human thing, I think, because we have a vision of what quote normal is,
Right.
And whenever there's something that's outside of that picture that we have, we think there's something wrong. So I just think that's interesting that that's a common phrase. And talking about kids, I think, I don't know where the line is, but there's always a line. Like, and I started seeing it with some of my own younger family members where they realize that there's finally something different, and they're starting to see it from the standpoint of how kids start to judge kids, and when judgment comes in and they're like,
Right.
hey, why why are you walking like that? Stop walking like that. And it's
Right.
always a practice of, okay, how do we approach this, and how do I say it in the best way that they're gonna get it? Because it's just they don't understand.
Right. And you know, and having said that, we have made disability synonymous with broken. We have made difference in many instances synonymous with something being wrong. And the truth is, that has been the result of people trying to create societies where everyone is the same. So anything that's different is wrong or broken or bad. When the truth is, we all are different. We all are unique. And those unique qualities, those different characteristics, are not inherently bad or broken. In fact, I see disability just as that, a point of diversity that is not to be judged in a negative way, that is not even to be looked at upon and revered. But the truth is, it is simply a point of diversity. Just like I have brown eyes, someone else may have blue eyes, or I have a propensity or I have a liking for a certain thing, and other people have a distaste for another thing. So I really see disability as a point of diversity. And so when people approach it with, there is something that's wrong, there is something that's missing, there is something that's broken, that is the time for us to educate that there's nothing wrong, broken, or missing about this person. It is simply a point of diversity. It's a part of what makes them unique. I am LaMondre Pough. You are Nathan Todd. We are two totally different individuals. However, we can come together on some common bonds, and I don't see deficits. I don't see you as broken. Hopefully, you don't see me as broken. So I think it's a part of the reprogramming of how we see differences and how we see diversity within each other.
Yeah. Yeah, that's huge, and it impacts so much more than just this conversation. There,
Absolutely, guys.
there's so many people that are walking around, and I had a conversation with somebody earlier this week, and that was my whole point of the conversation was, well, what if there's nothing wrong? What if the only thing that's standing in your way from having a relationship you want with somebody is the idea that you think something's wrong, but it's not. It just is what it is, and they're living their life the best way they know how. And at the end of the day, I think along with it being wrong, bad, whatever we want to say, the other frame of reference is that we need to be taken care of. Right. And I think that is a whole nother type of conversation. But I think that comes from a place, again, of not actually having conversation about, hey, what do you want? What do you need? And just basic conversations to see. Because like holding the door open for me doesn't usually help me.
Right.
It makes it harder for me to try and navigate through the door.
Right. I get it. And explain why it makes it harder. Go ahead and explain why, because I think the conversation is important, but I also think the interaction is important as well. But explain why.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's something we're all taught when we're young, right? Oh, it's good to hold the door open. But when the door's held open for me, somebody is standing usually up against the door to hold it open. And with what is going on with my gait because of my disability, I take up a lot of space when walking to have as much balance as possible. And normally holding on to the door is a point of safety, and it makes it easier for me to get through. But with somebody standing right there, it makes me have to get a lot smaller and try and navigate in a way where it's not actually safe for me to try. So I end up tripping over my own feet or tripping over their feet. Uh, and it's just one of those things, like, you take it as it comes.
Right.
If they're holding it open, I just, for most part, I try and try and make it through. Um, I don't remember if I told this on any other interview, but there would be times at college when I'd be leaving one of the buildings that had um, the door opener, and I would see people that were walking, and they would see me, and it was like a race to get to the door because I knew they wanted to help and they wanted to open the door. And sometimes I'd be like, "Hey, man, nah, don't, please don't open the door. It'll make it easier if you don't."
Right, right. And some people find that really hard to accept because they don't understand how can me opening the door or holding the door for him make it more difficult for him. I'm removing the barrier, but while removing the barrier, they're also removing the brace. And that is the problem. That they're removing
Yeah.
the thing that would support you. And here's why I say interaction is so important, because we can have that conversation. This is a great point uh, in terms of that story that you just told. We can have the conversation, but even in having that conversation, until the interaction is actually there and it becomes a teachable moment, people still may not get it. They still won't see it. And honestly, you make the choice to kind of work through it. You make the choice of, okay, they've got the door open. I may fall on my face or I may trip over them, but hey, I'm not going to say anything. Now, you could have at that very moment also said, hey man, don't no, just let the door go close because I'm going to use that door as a brace. But those are the kinds of choices and those are the kinds of situations that we find ourselves in all the time. Now, some people would have said, oh man, that dude is angry, or that dude is problematic because I held the door for him and he told me not to hold the door. What I was just being nice, not understanding that the reason you told them not to hold the door was because it made it safer and better for both of you in that situation. So that's why I believe the interactions are important. That's why I believe not just the conversation, it must move beyond dialogue and go into interaction. This is why I believe we have to be seen. We have to be in the community, living life, not just on the basis or in terms of disability, but in terms of life. It's navigating the world.
Yeah. I think that's so important. Like, because there's probably times when I do take the time and say, hey, here's the reason why. And like you said, we make those choices every day on what we choose to disclose and not disclose. And man, we're going way deeper than we even did on the first half of this, I feel like. But disclosure, right? I think we've been taught for a long time to not disclose. And there's many people that have invisible disabilities where they absolutely have to make the choice of, okay, do I tell people what's going on or do I choose not to? Where you and I having physical disability, like, there's nothing we can do to hide to show that there's something different. But I wonder, what do you think it's going to take, or even if you agree or don't agree, but with disclosure, what do you think would help people be more open to disclosing for themselves?
I think that, well, let me preference this by saying, first of all, there are so many taboos and there are so many negative consequences associated with certain kinds of disabilities and certain kinds of disclosures. So I think that the thing that would make people more open is if we could create safe spaces, if we could reduce if we could eliminate the taboos that are associated with that. Because honestly, other than just personal choice in terms of being an introvert or just not wanting people in your business like that, as we say, um, that most people are afraid to disclose because of the negativity um, that could come from disclosing certain disabilities in certain situations. So I think that one of the things that would help in that is creating places where people belong. And I'm not just talking about an inclusive environment. I'm talking about an environment where people are free to be who they are, to be exactly who and what they are. I believe that we need to move from the concept of diversity and inclusion to the concept of belonging. How do we create work environments where people belong? How do we create social situations where people really feel like they belong? Because if a person truly feels like they belong, then inclusion and diversity is automatic. When people really feel that they are a part of something, then that inclusion and diversity is the norm. It is the standard. It is the base of operation from that perspective. And so the fear that people have to disclosing things is typically because there is some kind of negative effect that comes into place with that. So they hide. So they choose to keep quiet. So they refuse in many instances to disclose situations that honestly, had they done so, there may have been an accommodation or something that would have made things a lot easier for them. And honestly, even better for the organization that they're dealing with or the social situation that they're in. But because of fear and because of the negative consequences that could come from that, they've chosen not to. So in other words, everyone suffers then. You know,
Yeah,
but again, disclosure is personal choice.
yeah. It's always personal choice, and I'll give a different. So you talk um, in community, and I'll give a different view of that as well. And I think about there's so much with online dating. That's one of the biggest questions that I've always faced for myself. Okay, do I disclose this? How do I disclose it? When do I disclose it? Because at the end of the day, it does have an impact on how that other person views me. It doesn't impact how I view myself, but I know that okay, uh, if I don't disclose and I show up and I'm completely different, like you see me on here, you wouldn't know anything that I had a disability at all. And then I come walking in and they're like, "Oh, hey, I wasn't ready for this." But I just wanted to give that as a point of reference as something that like disclosure impacts all areas of life for sure.
That's a great example too, man. I actually did I'm recently divorced. I've been divorced for almost a year now, and so I did a online dating profile, and the first picture that's up there is just a picture of me smiling, just this is my big black face just teasing, but then I made a conscious choice that the pictures after that would show me living my life. It's me on stage speaking. It's me, hanging out with friends. It's me doing these things because, first of all, if we're talking about a situation where people are trying to get to know you, I want them to know me. You know, and here's the thing, because you're right, it doesn't change the way I feel about myself. I am who I am, and I love who I am. However, if someone has a hang up about disability, or if my disability could be a hindrance to them connecting with me or wanting to get to know me, then they don't need to talk to me anyway.
Don't waste
So
time. Yeah.
exactly, don't even waste the time. So I put it up there very, very much upfront and out there. And you know, of course, it's impossible to tell what impact it has had on the responses that I've gotten. But the truth is, I don't care, because the person that wants to get to know me, the person who wants to develop a friendship with me, they're going to have to develop that friendship with everything that I bring to the table.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
this is who I am. My disability is not the defining point, but it's certainly a defining point of who I am. And it's a part of what informs how I see the world. And because of that, when you have a conversation with the smiling LaMondre that you were attracted to the picture, you're having that conversation with everything that all of those other pictures represent as well.
Yeah, that's great. I hope that there's some young people who are signed up for this that get to see this part of the conversation, because I think it's something that we don't talk about as a disabled community a lot. Like, because there's so many people that are facing all of these issues. I want to go back, and I want this to be where we kind of end our conversation, and I want to talk about that sense of belonging and that safe space. And I want to understand from your perspective, what does a safe space look like?
A safe place is a place where I could fall and not sustain serious injury. A safe place is, I think about it when a child first learns to walk and how unstable they are on their feet, and they take a few steps and they fall, bam. But the parent or guardian doesn't look at that child and say, oh, you failure, you'll never walk, and throw them in the crib. No, you got it. Get back up, champ. You got it. And they encourage them to keep stepping. They encourage them to keep walking. A safe place is a place to fall and still be loved, to fall and still be encouraged to get up and continue to walk and continue to make steps. And guess what? You're going to fall. And even when you begin to run, and once you've mastered the concept of walking and now you're into running, you're going to fall again. Get back up. And not only do you have that place to be free from injury, or at least sustain as little injury as possible when you fall, but you also have the opportunity to advance. You have the opportunity to grow. You have the opportunity to evolve and to change your mind even. Because here's the thing, and this is something that I think is indicative of the times that we live in. We have a tendency to throw people away when they make mistakes, and we call it cancel culture, where somebody does something or somebody says something that was out of pocket, that was out of line, and we want to trash their entire existence. We want to erase the fact that they ever even existed off of the face of the earth. But the truth is, we all grow, we all change, we all evolve. And to have a place where that evolution can be lived out loud, I think is important. Because the truth is, if you think the exact same way at 30 that you did when you were 20, something is wrong in that situation. Because as humans, we grow, we evolve, we change. And so a safe place is a place that we can grow, that we can evolve, that we can change, that we can make mistakes, that we can fall, but that we can also get back up again and start a new path. And the sense of belonging that I speak of is a place where, as I said before, I can bring all of me to the table, and I'm valued, and I'm heard, I'm seen. And the flip side of that is that you can come to the table and you're valued, and you're heard, and you're seen. So that is that place of belonging where I can make a contribution, and that contribution means something that I can work towards a common good with others. And my contribution means something. So those two concepts, a safe place and a sense of belonging, is really what I'm fighting for. And I will tell you, Nathan, it is so important to understand that with all of our diversity and with all of the differences that people with disabilities bring to the table, the truth is we all are intersectional, meaning that we all have differences, we all have unique characteristics, and that is not monolithic. That is not just one thing. The fact that I have a disability, yeah, that's true. But I'm also a black man. I'm also a black man raised in South Carolina. Um, all of those things inform my perspective of the world. And all of those things make me uniquely human, just as it does you. So there's nothing broken. There's nothing missing. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing, there is nothing that is less than. There is nothing that is subhuman. All of it makes me human, and all of it is perfect.
Mm. Yeah, when you were talking about the part about growing, I was thinking even my own perspective on disability continues to grow. If you were to, like, if we had a teleportation device and we brought me back to when I first started working in independent living, like my perspective is completely different than where it was back in the beginning of those days. And
Right.
I think that's what makes us the world that we live in. And the goal is in creating that sense of belonging, creating that being seen, heard, and valued. Because if you feel that, I mean, talk about creating great relationships. If you can create that within someone where they feel that, they'll do anything for you. They'll go out of their way to do something for you because you created something within them that they probably didn't have before. Um,
I agree.
so is there anything you want to leave the audience with today?
Yeah, I think it's important that we all recognize that this world is ours. This world is ours. And that means basically that we are responsible. We are responsible to be exactly who and what we are. And I know that there are many instances and situations where society has said that you have to be this, or you have to think this way, or you have to move this way, or your life can't be this, but it can be that. The truth is, you create your reality, you create the world around you. And my thinking is, you are a light. So your responsibility, your duty is to shine with all that you are, with everything that you have, is to shine. What does it mean to shine? It means to live your life authentically, to do the things that move you, to do the things that you're gifted to do the things that you're skilled at doing, to do the things that you believe will make this world a better place than when you found it. That is your duty. That is your obligation. And your obligation also is to allow others to do the same. Allow others to live their lives as big and as full and as authentic as they choose to. So live your life. Live your life. Make mistakes, fail, get up, dust yourself off, move forward. Whatever it is, continue to progress, continue to move forward. And we recognize that this conversation really is not about disabilities at all. It's not about equal rights. It's not even really about diversity. This conversation is really about people. It's about humans being human. That's what it's about. It's about us living a life that's meaningful. It's about us living a life on purpose. So the last thing that I would say, just to wrap it up, is this. Remember, today is the perfect day to be the change that you want to see. Live big, live full, live authentic.
And I don't think there's any other way to close out this interview. Um, if you saw this and you gained some morsel of new perspective, if it helped you peel back the label of disability and understand it a little bit more, make sure and leave us a comment. Um, where can people connect with you, LaMondre?
Absolutely. You can connect with me on Twitter or on Instagram, LaMondre_P. That's LAMONDRE_P as in Papa. Or you can connect with me on Facebook, LaMondre Pough. That's LAMONDREPOUGH. Or you can email me, LaMondre, LAMONDRE @gmail.com, or you can connect with me at ruhglobal.com, ruhglobal.com. So, yeah, those are the ways you can get in contact with me.
Awesome, man. I appreciate your time as always, and I appreciate the insights you brought to the table today.
Nathan, I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you, man. You're doing an amazing job, man. Thank you.